The boss had always laughed at the quiet IT intern, dismissing her as nothing more than a shadow in the bustling office. But when a dangerous $10 million breach threatened to drain the company dry, it wasn't the seasoned pros or the loud voices that saved the day. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and let's dive into a world where truth and betrayal dance together. Ready? Let's begin. I woke up early that morning, nerves twisting in my stomach like a coiled snake. As the new IT intern at Kingston Financial Technologies, I knew this was my chance to prove myself, but the grandeur of the glass tower looming in front of me made my confidence waver. The building's mirrored facade reflected the bustling city around it, cars, buses, and hurried people, all swallowed by the cold steel and glass of capitalism's fortress. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of expensive cologne and fresh coffee, a scent that only made me feel more out of place in my budget suit and scuffed shoes. I walked through the sleek lobby, my fingers brushing the soft leather of my laptop bag as I reminded myself to breathe. I had spent years studying to get here, late nights hunched over code, learning the intricacies of networks and firewalls while the world outside slept. But as I rode the elevator up, the quiet hum of machinery felt louder than my heartbeat, and the weight of every unspoken doubt settled on my shoulders. Everywhere I looked, there were screens flickering with data streams and people in crisp shirts and pencil skirts, their voices clipped and professional, moving like they belonged there in a way I could only hope to someday. I walked past rows of desks, feeling like I was being watched by 1,000 invisible eyes, each one judging me for the way I clutched my laptop bag too tightly to my side. My desk was a small cubicle tucked near the back, far from the bright windows and the bustling energy of the main floor. I didn't mind at first. I liked the quiet. I told myself it would give me space to focus, to learn. But it also made me invisible, and in an office where status meant everything, that was a dangerous thing. Mr. Kingston himself was a towering figure of authority, a man whose presence seemed to silence the room the moment he entered. He wore tailored suits and muted tones, his silver hair cut close, and his sharp eyes scanning everything like a hawk. My first encounter with him was brief but unforgettable. He walked by my cubicle, paused just long enough to glance at me, then turned his attention elsewhere as though my existence was nothing but a smudge on the pristine glass walls. I'd heard rumors about him, how he built the company from a small consultancy to a multi-million-dollar powerhouse, how he was both brilliant and ruthless. I wanted to impress him, to show that I could be more than just another name on an internship roster. But he never looked my way twice. At first, I tried not to let it get to me. I told myself that if I worked hard enough, if I kept my head down and did everything perfectly, someone would notice. Someone would see that I wasn't just another intern, that I had ideas and skills worth listening to. I spent my days absorbing everything I could about the company's systems, noting every outdated patch and every vulnerability that seemed to slip through unnoticed. I wanted to help. I wanted to make things better. But every time I opened my mouth to offer a suggestion, the words dried up in my throat, and I could feel their eyes sliding past me like I wasn't even there. It was in one of those rare moments, during a team meeting where I'd finally found the courage to speak up, that Mr. Kingston's laughter cut through my resolve like a blade. I had carefully explained how the company's security protocols were old and patchwork, how even a minor breach could cost millions in data and trust. I'd spent days preparing that presentation, rehearsing every line until it was etched in my mind. But before I could finish, he laughed. A short, dismissive chuckle that made my cheeks burn and my stomach twist with humiliation. "Let's not waste time with fantasies, Miss Carter," he said, his voice like ice. "Focus on what's in your lane, coffee runs, patch updates, maybe a fresh coat of paint on the server logs." The meeting moved on as if I'd never spoken. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone in the room could hear it. I nodded along to the rest of the conversation, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying that moment over and over. I thought of all the nights I'd spent teaching myself to code, the hours spent poring over encryption textbooks until my eyes blurred. I thought of the pride I'd felt when I fixed my father's old computer, the sense of accomplishment when I finally cracked a stubborn firewall. I thought of the way I'd always believed that skill and hard work could break through any wall, no matter how high. But as the meeting ended and I packed up my things, a quiet resolve settled into my chest. I would not let his laughter define me. I would not let his words bury the fire I'd carried with me all these years. If no one else would listen to me, then I would find a way to make them see. My mind was already racing with possibilities, lines of code forming in the back of my thoughts like a secret language only I could hear. Mr. Kingston's laughter was still ringing in my ears, but underneath it, there was something else, a quiet, insistent voice telling me that I was not as small as they thought. I walked back to my cubicle, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. The office around me seemed to fade away, the chatter and the clatter of keyboards turning into a distant hum. I knew what I had to do. In that moment, I wasn't the quiet intern anymore. I was a silent warrior, preparing for a battle only I could fight. And I would not lose. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the small window that looked out over the city's flickering lights. The laughter I'd endured from Mr. Kingston was still ringing in my head like a cruel melody, each echo driving my thoughts deeper into a stubborn, determined place I hadn't known existed within me. I thought about how he had looked at me as if I were a child playing dress-up, not someone who had spent countless nights teaching herself the art of digital defense. My small apartment felt colder than usual, and the ticking of the clock on my wall seemed to mock me with every second that passed. I made myself a cup of coffee and set my laptop down on the small table that doubled as my dining space. The aroma of the coffee was bitter, filling the room with a scent that should have comforted me but only added to the restlessness in my chest. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, hesitating as if the weight of the decision I was about to make pressed down on them. I knew what I was about to do might get me fired or worse, but I also knew I couldn't let Mr. Kingston's ignorance be the end of my story. My mind was buzzing with lines of code, new defenses I'd studied and memorized in the quiet of my room, while others were out living lives that didn't include late-night coding sessions and encrypted chat rooms. I began to type, slowly at first, then faster as the rhythm of the work took hold of me. The old security system of Kingston Financial Technologies had always seemed like a half-finished puzzle to me. Pieces jammed together in a way that worked just enough to pass inspections, but left dangerous gaps, hidden cracks waiting to be exploited. I had seen them on my first day, small signs of negligence that no one seemed to care about. My fingers moved across the keys, rewriting those gaps, fortifying the walls Mr. Kingston had laughed at me for even daring to question. The hours passed unnoticed. I became a machine of purpose, my breathing slow and even as my mind danced from line to line, weaving a new tapestry of digital armor. I built firewalls that shifted and adapted, learning from every attempt to breach them. I wrote algorithms that would confuse and misdirect, creating a labyrinth so twisted that even the most determined hacker would find themselves lost within its walls. My coffee grew cold beside me, untouched as I poured my heart into the code, each keystroke a quiet act of defiance. At one point, I paused to rub the ache from my shoulders and glanced at the clock. It was nearly 3 in the morning. The city outside was quiet, the world asleep while I worked. My apartment felt like a secret bunker, the only place where my voice could be heard, if only in the language of numbers and logic. The hum of my laptop fan was the only sound, a steady lullaby to the chaos of my thoughts. I thought about my father and how he had always told me to speak up, to be brave even when my voice felt small. This was my way of speaking up. This was my battle cry. By the time the first hints of dawn lightened the sky, I had finished. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers tingling from the hours of typing. My eyes burned with exhaustion, but inside me there was a calm I hadn't felt in days. The new security protocols were complete, stronger, smarter, and more flexible than anything Kingston Financial Technologies had ever deployed. I knew they worked because I had built them with every ounce of skill and knowledge I possessed. And I knew, deep down, that if a real attack came, These defenses would stand where the old ones would have crumbled. I saved the final version of the protocols and stared at the lines of code on my screen, feeling both pride and fear in equal measure. I didn't have the authority to implement them, but I couldn't bear the thought of them sitting idle while the company remained vulnerable. I told myself I would wait. Wait until I could find a way to convince someone, anyone, to let me show them how much stronger we could be. My eyes drifted closed for a moment, and in that moment of half-sleep, I saw Mr. Kingston's face again, smirking, dismissive. But this time, the memory didn't hurt. It only made me more certain of what I had to do. When I finally pulled myself from my chair, the sun was beginning to rise, casting a soft orange glow over the city's jagged skyline. I felt like I had been reborn in those hours, no longer the girl who kept her head down and her thoughts to herself. In the quiet of my apartment, I whispered a promise to myself. They would see. They would know that I was not just another intern. My work would speak for me in a language no laughter could silence. I had just closed my laptop and let out a weary sigh when my phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up with an urgent alert. At first, I thought it might be another routine update or a maintenance notification, but as I squinted at the screen, the words cut through my fatigue like a blade. There was an active breach attempt. Someone was trying to worm their way into the company's financial systems. My pulse quickened, and for a moment, I just stared at the message, feeling the weight of what it meant settle heavy in my chest. I rubbed my eyes and forced myself to focus, reading the details of the alert over and over. It wasn't a drill or a simulation. This was real. Someone was exploiting those very gaps in the security system I had spent the night fortifying. My mind raced through the possibilities, my thoughts sharper than the fear clawing at the edges of my mind. I thought about the millions of dollars that could vanish in minutes, about the careers and lives that would be upended if the breach succeeded. But more than that, I thought about how I had built the answer, how my work, my code, was the only thing standing between safety and disaster. I knew I had no authority to act, but in that moment, the idea of waiting for permission seemed laughable. My hands were trembling as I powered my laptop back on, the familiar hum of the fan grounding me as I logged into the company's secure portal. My admin rights were limited, nothing more than what an intern should have, but I had learned enough in the weeks I'd been there to find my way around the system's maze of protocols and permissions. The breach was still in its early stages, the intruder probing for weaknesses like a wolf testing a fence. My heart pounded in my chest as I typed in the commands that would unlock the gates of my new defenses. I hesitated for just a moment, my finger hovering over the enter key. If this didn't work, if my protocols failed, I would be exposed as an unauthorized meddler, someone who had overstepped in a world that valued hierarchy above all. But the thought of doing nothing was worse. I pressed the key, and the new code surged into place, overriding the old, brittle defenses with the fortress I had spent the night crafting. I watched the lines of data shift and realign, the digital equivalent of steel doors slamming shut, and felt a fierce pride bloom in my chest. The attack intensified as the hacker realized the system was changing. Alerts flooded the console, each one more frantic than the last. My breath caught in my throat as I watched my protocols react. Detecting, isolating, repelling the intruder like a living thing. I was no longer an intern in that moment. I was the architect of a shield that held strong, the keeper of secrets no one had believed I was capable of protecting. My hands moved across the keyboard with a calm precision, adjusting parameters and sealing off vulnerabilities faster than the attacker could adapt. Minutes stretched into an eternity as I fought in the glow of the screen, my apartment silent except for the quiet hum of the city outside. I imagined the hacker on the other end, frustrated and angry, their fingers moving just as quickly as mine, trying to break through the labyrinth I had built. But for every move they made, I had already prepared a counter. I felt like I was dancing in a dark room, the two of us locked in a silent battle where only one would emerge unscathed. As the final wave of the attack broke against my defenses, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. The console fell quiet, the last alert blinking and then vanishing as the connection was severed. The breach attempt had failed. My protocols had held. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, my fingers trembling as they hovered over the keys. The silence in my apartment felt profound, as if the whole world had paused to acknowledge what I had done. I sat back in my chair, the weight of exhaustion finally settling in as I processed what had just happened. I had acted without permission, stepping far beyond what any intern should have dared. But I had also protected the company, saved it from a loss that would have crippled its reputation and its future. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the adrenaline drain away. My mind buzzed with everything that might come next: disciplinary meetings, angry managers, maybe even lawsuits. But for now, I pushed those thoughts aside and let myself feel the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I had done what no one else could. When I finally stood up, the first rays of dawn were seeping into the room, casting a pale light across my desk. My coffee sat cold and untouched, a silent witness to the battle I had just fought. I knew that when I walked into the office later that morning, nothing would be the same. I had crossed a line, and there would be consequences. Good or bad, I didn't know. But I also knew one thing with absolute certainty: they would see me now. They would have to. The morning air outside felt fresh, but as I walked through the revolving doors of Kingston Financial Technologies, the weight of what I'd done pressed against my shoulders like an invisible force. I moved past the glass lobby, the sleek marble floors echoing the quick, urgent steps of employees already caught up in the chaos of the day. My stomach twisted with a mix of fear and determination, the quiet resolve I'd forged in the solitude of my apartment now propelling me forward. I felt like I was stepping into a different world, a world where every word I spoke and every move I made would be scrutinized in ways I hadn't yet dared to imagine. The office was buzzing in a way I'd never seen before. Phones rang off the hook, hushed voices whispered with an edge of panic, and the normal, polite chatter of coworkers had vanished under a blanket of tension. I paused near the door, taking in the sudden shift in atmosphere. My desk was no longer just a quiet corner. Now, it felt like the eye of a storm. My heart pounded as I walked slowly to my seat, trying to gather my thoughts. My laptop sat there, waiting for me, a silent accomplice to the actions I'd taken just hours earlier. I caught glimpses of the senior IT team in hurried conversation, faces tight with worry as they huddled around screens flashing with last night's security logs. I knew they were seeing the same thing I had. Someone had tried to steal everything, and someone else had stopped them cold. Mr. Kingston was in the middle of it all, his expression carved from stone, but I could see the flicker of something uncertain in his eyes as he barked orders to his team. It was the first time I'd seen him look anything other than absolutely sure of himself. That alone made me stand a little straighter. He didn't look my way at first. But when he did, it was as though the noise of the entire office faded into the background. He walked towards me, his polished shoes striking the floor with a deliberate rhythm that echoed in my ears. My mouth felt dry as he stopped in front of my cubicle, his gaze cold and questioning. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice low but carrying an edge that made my skin prickle. "I want to know exactly what happened last night." For a moment, the air seemed to freeze around us. I took a deep breath, the memory of the breach and the frantic lines of code I had written burning fresh in my mind. I stood up, meeting his eyes without flinching. "There was an attack," I said quietly. "They tried to breach our financial systems. The old security framework wasn't strong enough. So I deployed new protocols. My protocols." My voice didn't shake, though my hands were trembling at my sides. I had no idea how he would react. He didn't interrupt. He just stared at me, his eyes narrowing slightly as he processed my words. Around us, the room seemed to hold its breath. "Your protocols," he repeated slowly, his tone unreadable. "You're an intern. You don't have the authority to make those decisions." There was a flicker of anger in his voice, but I thought I saw something else too, something closer to curiosity. Maybe even respect, though it was buried deep. "I know," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I didn't have permission. But I couldn't watch them steal everything while I had the power to stop it." I had to act. The room was completely silent now. I could feel the weight of every pair of eyes in the office on me. My chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths as I waited for his reaction. Mr. Kingston's mouth tightened, his jaw working as though he were holding back something sharp. For a moment, I thought he might explode, might call security and have me escorted out on the spot. But instead, he slowly nodded, a short, sharp movement. "Show me," he said. "Show me exactly what you did." His voice was calm now, the calm of someone who had seen a storm blow through and was determined to understand how it had left everything standing. I sat down at my desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. He stood behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his presence. I walked him through the breach attempt, the weaknesses in the old framework, and the defenses I had built to stand against the attack. My voice was low, each word measured and precise. As I spoke, I could see the logs on the screen, my code holding the line against the intruder's attempts to slip past it, turning them away at every point. When I finished, Mr. Kingston was silent for a long moment. Finally, he let out a slow breath and stepped back, his expression thoughtful. "You did this without guidance, without oversight," he said. "But you did it right." His words were quiet, but they carried a weight that made my heart thud in my chest. "We'll have to discuss your actions further, but you stopped what could have been a disaster. That's something we can't ignore." He turned and walked back to his office, leaving me standing there with my hands resting on the edge of my desk. The noise of the office began to swell around me again, but it felt different now. Less like chaos and more like possibility. My quiet voice had broken through the silence, and no one could pretend not to hear it anymore. I let myself breathe, feeling the tension ease from my shoulders. As I sat back down, I knew the path ahead wouldn't be simple. There would be questions, probably even consequences for what I had done without permission. But there would also be conversations that had never been possible before. In the hush that settled around my thoughts, I realized something. I had found my voice, not in the way I'd always been told to, loud and insistent, but in the quiet strength of doing what needed to be done. And I wasn't going to let them take that away from me. In the days that followed, the air in the office seemed to shift, like the tension had been replaced by a cautious curiosity. I could feel it in the way people glanced at me now, their eyes no longer sliding past as if I were part of the furniture. Instead, there was a flicker of something else, respect, maybe, or at least a grudging acknowledgement that the quiet intern they'd overlooked had done something no one else had thought possible. I tried to stay focused, but every time I met someone's gaze, I felt a surge of warmth in my chest that made it hard to keep my head down. Mr. Kingston called me into his office on a Friday morning, the door clicking shut behind me as I stepped inside. His office was immaculate, everything in its place, the city skyline stretching out behind him through the tall glass windows. He motioned for me to sit, his expression as unreadable as always. For a moment, I was certain I was about to be reprimanded, maybe even fired for my actions. My hands tightened around the edge of the chair as I waited for him to speak. But when he finally looked at me, there was no anger in his eyes. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice calm and deliberate, "you took a risk. A dangerous one. You acted without authorization, and that can't be ignored." But he paused, his gaze steady on mine. "You also saved this company from what could have been a catastrophic loss. Your work, your instincts, were exactly what we needed, even if no one realized it at the time." My breath caught in my throat, a rush of relief and disbelief washing over me in equal measure. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "I've spoken with the board. We all agree that you've demonstrated not only skill, but a level of initiative and determination that sets you apart." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a sleek folder, sliding it across the desk to me. My fingers hesitated as I picked it up, my heart pounding as I read the words printed across the top: Security Analyst, Full-Time Position. I blinked, the letters blurring for a moment as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. "I know this isn't how these things usually happen," he continued, his tone softening slightly. "But after what you've done, I'd be a fool to keep you as an intern. You've proven yourself, Miss Carter. You're ready for more responsibility, if you're willing to take it." I looked up from the folder, my hands trembling as I set it down on the desk. For a moment, all the doubts and fears I'd carried with me seemed to fade, replaced by a quiet certainty that had been growing stronger every day. "I'm ready," I said softly, my voice steady and sure. "I won't let you down." Mr. Kingston gave a small nod, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I believe that," he said. "You've already shown me you're capable of things I didn't expect. Now, let's see what else you can do." He stood, offering his hand across the desk. I took it, the handshake firm and final, sealing the promise of a new beginning that I had forged in the glow of my laptop screen and the quiet of my late-night resolve. When I stepped out of his office, the world seemed brighter somehow, the weight I'd carried for so long lifting off my shoulders with every step I took. My new desk was waiting for me in the heart of the IT operations center, no longer tucked away in a forgotten corner. The room hummed with the quiet efficiency of machines and people working in perfect rhythm, and for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged there. My nameplate gleamed on the edge of the desk, a small but powerful symbol of everything I had fought to achieve. The first few days in my new role were a blur of meetings and introductions, my head spinning with the flood of information and responsibility. But through it all, there was a quiet thrill in my chest, a sense that I was exactly where I was meant to be. In the weeks that followed, I found myself building new systems and refining old ones, my ideas now met with careful consideration instead of dismissive laughter. I worked late into the nights sometimes, not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because every line of code I wrote felt like another step forward, another piece of the quiet strength I had carried with me all along. I still felt the sting of Mr. Kingston's laughter in my memory sometimes, but now it was a reminder of how far I had come, a testament to the power of believing in myself even when no one else did. I knew there would be challenges ahead, moments when I would falter or doubt myself again. But I also knew that I had proven something to myself in that dark, quiet night when I had chosen to act instead of staying silent. I had found my voice, not in loud declarations or grand gestures, but in the quiet, steady work of doing what needed to be done. And as I sat at my new desk, surrounded by the hum of servers and the glow of monitors, I knew one thing for certain: I was ready. I was more than ready, and I would never let them, or myself, forget that again. The weeks that followed felt like a slow dawn, the light growing stronger each day as I stepped into the life I had quietly fought for. My new role came with challenges that pushed me to the edge of what I thought I was capable of: late-night calls with vendors, emergency patches for vulnerabilities no one else had seen, and the weight of knowing that every decision I made could ripple out across the entire company. But I didn't shrink from it. I let each moment strengthen me, like steel tempered in the forge of sleepless nights and quiet determination. Mr. Kingston was still a presence in the office, still a man whose opinions could make or break a career in an instant. But the way he looked at me now was different. There was no laughter in his eyes when he stopped by my desk to ask for updates, no dismissive smirk when I offered suggestions. Instead, there was a weight to his questions, a sense that he truly wanted to hear what I had to say. It was a quiet shift, but it meant more to me than any title or promotion ever could have. One afternoon, he stopped by while I was reviewing logs from a routine security sweep. His shadow fell across my desk, and for a moment, I felt the old flicker of unease in my chest. But when I looked up, I saw that his expression was calm, his eyes thoughtful. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice as steady and deliberate as always, "I wanted to thank you again for what you did. You could have stayed quiet. You could have left it alone. But you didn't." He paused, his gaze holding mine. "You saw what others didn't, and you had the courage to act on it. That's something I won't forget." I nodded, my throat tight with a mix of pride and relief. "Thank you, Mr. Kingston," I said softly. The words felt small in the space between us, but I knew he understood their weight. In that quiet moment, I felt the last of my doubts melt away. I had earned my place here, not because of a title or a nameplate on my desk, but because of the strength I had found in myself, the strength to act, to speak, and to stand firm in the face of doubt. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself settling into the rhythm of the office in a way I never had before. My colleagues no longer looked past me in meetings. They listened when I spoke, their nods and questions a quiet affirmation that I was no longer invisible. I worked late sometimes, the glow of the monitors and the soft hum of the servers a comforting backdrop to the thoughts and ideas that kept me awake at night. There was a quiet satisfaction in the work, an understanding that every line of code I wrote was a testament to the journey I had taken, the walls I had scaled, and the laughter I had silenced. One evening, as the office emptied out and the sky turned to soft twilight outside the windows, I sat at my desk and let myself breathe. The room was quiet, the kind of stillness that had once made me feel small and uncertain. But now it felt like something else. A reminder that silence could be powerful, that strength didn't always need to be loud to be heard. I thought of all the times I had let myself be overlooked, the hours I had spent doubting whether I was good enough. And I realized, with a quiet clarity, that I had never needed their permission to be great. I had only needed my own. Mr. Kingston walked by as I was shutting down my computer, pausing for a moment to look at me. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The slight incline of his head, the quiet respect in his eyes, said more than words ever could. I watched him walk away, the memory of his laughter now nothing more than a distant echo. I had taken that moment of mockery and turned it into my own victory, a quiet, powerful triumph that no one could take from me. As I stepped out of the office that night, the cool evening air wrapped around me like a promise. The city lights stretched out in every direction, each one a small, brilliant point of hope. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, more doubts, more tests of my resolve. But I also knew that I had faced the worst of it and come out stronger. I had found my voice in the quiet, in the determination that no one else could see but me. I walked home with a calm certainty in my chest. The memory of that first day at Kingston Financial Technologies now a quiet testament to how far I had come. The quiet intern who had once been overlooked was gone, replaced by someone who had proven, if only to herself, that quiet did not mean weak, and that silence did not mean invisible. In the glow of the city lights, I knew that I would carry that lesson with me always, that no one could ever laugh me into silence again. If you found this story inspiring, share it with someone who needs to hear that quiet doesn't mean weak. Subscribe, like, and comment to let us know your thoughts and join us for more stories of quiet strength and hidden power.